Good evening, everyone. Yeah, the Lord really has a sense of humor, and He expresses that sense of humor through His people. And when they asked me if I could speak in Big Fridays, and I said yes, I asked them, of course, what do you want me to speak about? And they asked me, can you speak about failure? And I said, can you choose somebody else? Not exactly the most popular topic, right? How many of you, if you were to be really honest with yourself, you have a fear of failing? Fear of failure? You may have failed before, or you may not have, or maybe you did, but you were asleep and don't know it. But as to having a fear of failure, I think it'll be perfectly normal to admit that we would have that in the back of our heads and in the depths of our hearts. To be really honest with you, as I know I should be all the time, I don't like failure. One of my, I guess, personality major areas of improvement is it's the fact that I lend myself oftentimes to what they call perfectionism, and that's not a good thing. I mean, that's many times that makes a person like me agitated, anxious, and Ikoy was very nice. He said attention to detail, but actually there's a word for that. It's called control freak. Any control freaks in the house tonight? Wow, okay, the one that's raising up somebody else's hand must be the control freak, right? I get it. Okay, so they said, can you speak on failure? And I said, yeah, okay. So what title do you want me to use? Because if you just say dealing with failure in the workplace, I'm not sure, even if the sun was shining, maybe we wouldn't have very many people in the room. So they gave me a really cool title. They said, Glow in the Dark. Isn't that cool? Glow in the Dark. Am I the only one who likes that title in this room? Okay, Glow in the Dark. But of course, I had to explain more or less what that really meant. And so I put a subtitle to the title, and that's Facing Failure with Focus. And I'll explain to you in the next few minutes why I feel, well, there are many things that we can face failure with, but since our time is limited, and we only have this place until about midnight, yeah, really, I thought maybe I'd say face failure with focus. Okay, so let's get on with it. Glow in the dark, face failure with focus. Let me ask you, does anybody in this room recognize these three gentlemen? Anybody? Anybody recognize them? Okay, probably not. Do you have a guess as to what these people do for a living? Based on their appearance. Okay, how many of you say UFC fighter? Okay, quite a number. How many of you say barroom bouncer? Okay. Well, I'll tell you, these three guys are the founders of what is known to, obviously not too many, the UDI dance troupe. Not UTI, okay? UDI. UDI are the letters, the first letters of the names of these three men, which I cannot remember. But they're the head of the UDI dance troupe. Okay, really, that's what they do for a living. They teach, they dance, and they teach. No. What's that doing there? Okay, here we go. Now, next question. Where do you think they're from? Any guess? I'll give you a clue. They are from Tomsk. Familiar? No? They're from Siberia. Yes, there is one dance troupe in Siberia. And this is them. Maybe there's more, I don't know. But there's something really unique about this UDI dance troupe. Their passion is to teach dance to children. As a matter of fact, many of the children that they teach dance to are underprivileged children in Siberia. Many of them are orphans, you know, the children that they train. And so these men, the UDI dance troupe, they had a goal. They had a vision, and they wanted to reach more of these underprivileged children with the unique craft that was entrusted to them, which is basically dance. So one day in 2015, the UDI dance troupe joined Britain's Got Talent. And they performed for the judges, just like all of the other contestants. Now remember, what is our title tonight? Glow in the Dark. Okay, so this was their performance. And I want to show you about maybe a 2.5-minute video clip of what they did. Maestro, are we ready now? It's now or never. Here we go. They got a standing ovation. Now, what was their objective? Why did they join that contest? You see, they had a vision. They wanted to reach many more children with the art of dance by building a large-scale dance school in their hometown. And so they figured if they won £250,000, which was the top prize, that would easily finance their vision to become reality. So the question is, did they win? Well, I won't keep you in suspense. They did not win. They came in number 10 out of 12 finalists. So they went home to Siberia without any money. Did they fail? Did they fail? Of course they failed, right? Their mission was to win. They didn't win. But did they really fail ultimately? Well, you know, when they came home to Siberia, they came home to a hero's welcome. And they were met, they had a meeting with the governor. And the governor, who is not me, that's him in the center. They met with the governor and the other authorities decided to give these gentlemen the land that they would need and the money to build the school. So did they win in the end? Yes. Yeah. Because they just kept on doing what they know they were called to do. And eventually, the victory came in a way that was completely unexpected. Our topic for tonight is Glow in the Dark, Face Failure with Focus. These guys were focused on what they wanted to do, and eventually it bore fruit. in ways like they never even imagined it could. What are our common responses when we fail? Lots of things. Partial list is on the screen. Discouragement, frustration, anger, wanting to quit, blaming other people, and ultimately, many times, blaming God Himself. Does this look like a reasonable list of common responses to failure? You may have others that you can add. Maybe you can discuss that in your tables later on. But the question is, what do these things accomplish? If we respond to failure in one or more of these ways, what does that accomplish? I think it will accomplish even greater frustration, greater discouragement, and so many other things. So these things are useless. Let's not even consider them whenever we meet up with failure. So again, our message tonight is glow in the dark, face failure with focus. I'd like to share with you just 2 Bible verses that speak to this issue. And these are from Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 8, verses 28 and 29. And verse 28 says, "And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose." Why don't we read that together one more time? Let's go. "And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose." Now, the first 3 words are, "and we know." You and I will never know this for a fact. It will not be truth in our lives. It will only be theory if we don't experience it ourselves, whether in something we're going through at the present or on hindsight. But this is what it says we know, that God causes all things to work together for good. Does that mean that everything will have a happy ending? That everybody will live happily ever after? Yes and no. It doesn't mean that everything will turn out well at the end and the problems will go away. That's not what it means. But what I want us to realize tonight is that only God can cause all things to do something. You and I are not in control of all things, even if sometimes we think we might be or we would like to be. There are many things in this world that are way beyond our control, and only God can cause all things to do anything in this world. If we look at that verse again, it says, God causes all things to work together for good. So you and I should not be obsessed with controlling all our circumstances nor the people around us. Instead, there are 2 things that you and I should focus on and ask ourselves. Number 1 is, do we love God? And number 2 is, are we living according to His calling in our lives? Are we called? Do we believe that we are? And if we are we living according to that calling? So, we'll take the second verse a little bit later on. But for now, we just accept the fact that only God is in control of all things, and since you and I are not God, we leave that to Him. Let's talk about the importance of focus. We said glowing in the dark is about facing failure with focus. Why is this so important? Well, let me introduce you to a very unique family. This family is called the Wallenda family. In the 1920s, the patriarch named Karl Wallenda decided that his family would be a family of aerialists, or tightrope walkers. And so this became their family tradition. As a matter of fact, if you would ask me, what is the best way to balance work and family? Is that a good question? This is the best way. This is their family, and this is their work. And what the family works at is balancing. That's the perfect picture of balancing work and family. And so since the 1920s, the Wallendas from one generation to the next have been doing this. They are aerialists, even up to this year, 2017. I'm not sure how many generations there have been since then, but this is what they keep on doing. Unfortunately, their patriarch, their founder, their founding father, quite literally, Karl Wallenda, experienced a tragedy a few decades ago, and I'll tell you about it. What happened to him has since been known as the Wallenda factor. I'll explain that to you in just a minute. But let me read the history. During his lifetime, Karl Wallenda became the world's best-known aerialist. He thrilled huge crowds all over the world with his daring high-wire stunts until he fell to his death as thousands watched in San Juan, Puerto Rico in 1978 when he, Karl Wallenda, was already 73 years old, still walking the tightrope. Now, what happened to him on that day? Well, some of you in this crowd, especially some of you who deal with statistics, you may say, well, the odds just caught up with the guy. After all, if you cross high wires for like 50 years or something, the odds just catch up with you. Maybe that could be true, but let me explain to you what they believe really happened. His own wife said this. His wife said that this was not the same man she had known. The man who had been so courageous, determined, and defiant in past acts. Now, meaning that day in 1978, now he was anxious and hesitant. For the first time, instead of putting his energies into walking the wire, it says he concentrated on not falling. You get what she said? Instead of concentrating on walking the wire, he was instead fixated on not falling. Question: did Karl Wallenda have a focus that day?
Yes.
Yes. Was he focused on the right thing? No. That was his problem. So his wife said, his widow was reported as saying that she felt her husband had become an accident waiting to happen, and looking back, she felt it was inevitable that he would fall. The importance of focus. It's not so much whether we have one or not. It's more like, are we focused on the right thing? And we'll get to that in just a moment. Meantime, what had happened to the greatest aerialist of his time has since been labeled the Wallenda factor. Psychology applies it to those who become paralyzed by the fear of failure, to those who dwell on the negatives and who only see the problem and never the possibility. And that's why we're talking about facing failure, whether the actual happening of it or the possibility of it happening. We need to face it with focus. Are we good so far? When you and I face life and all it has to throw at us with focus, when the darkness comes, we can glow in that darkness. Would you like to be able to glow in the dark? And it's not because you didn't wipe the oil off your face. It's because that glow comes from inside. So what should we focus on? What is the right focus when we face the possibility or the reality of failure? The first thing you and I should focus on is the goal. What is our objective? Now, it doesn't mean that focusing on the goal will guarantee success. But at least when we focus on the goal, it should help guarantee that we do the things that should lead to its accomplishment. The guys from the UDI dance troupe focused on their goal. They did their best. And obviously, divinely, their goal was taken care of at the end of the day, even if they were not able to achieve it themselves. Let me give you an illustration of what it means to focus on the goal. What is this? Okay, that is an ultrasound image of an unborn child. Many years ago, when my wife and I were married, we'll be 33 years in December. When she was pregnant with our first child, we made it our decision that we would not allow her, my wife, to go through the normal, anesthesia process, etc., what they used to call twilight years ago. And the reason why we made that decision was very clear and simple. Our doctor told us, our doctor is a natural childbirth doctor, or Lamaze doctor, as is sometimes termed as. He said, the problem when you use anesthesia just during the birth process is that your placenta is so efficient, that the moment the mother is administered anesthesia, it crosses the placenta in seconds and it impacts the unborn child. And that's why, at least if you've seen the videos from long ago, when the child is born, the doctor picks him up by his feet and he's hanging upside down, and the doctor has to slap his little bottom to make him wake up. Have you seen that image before? And you know, they say that that can really be traumatic for an unborn, for a newly born child. And I can understand why. Imagine, this is your first day out in the open, in the world, and a man who's not your father, who's wearing a mask, picks you up, turns you upside down, and slaps you from behind, and you're completely innocent. What a way to enter this world, right? So my wife and I said, none of that for our children. But it was going to take sacrifice. And the doctor said to my wife, he said, you're going to go through a lot of pain in your labor. And my wife went through 14 hours of labor in our first child, and even more in our second. And the doctor told me, you need to encourage her, you need to be a good coach, you need to teach her how to breathe, and all of these things, because that's what happened in Lamas, right? The husband is the coach. And he said, you can't faint when you see blood or anything like that, so thank God I didn't faint. I think I was a fairly good coach, but what's the point? The doctor told us, when the waves of pain come, you need to focus. And your focal point, he said, is your unborn child. You need to remember, why are you doing this in the first place? It's not to impress anyone, but it's to achieve the goal. You need to focus on the goal, because that will allow you to ride over the pain and to just go through the whole process until it's done. Now, some people say, well, you know, what if you end up having a cesarean? That means your Lamas has failed. Actually, that is not true. The goal of Lamas is to go through a birth process with knowledge, knowing what is needed and when and why. And if we were taught, if the baby or the mother are in distress, then perhaps a C-section is necessary, but never before that. So whichever way it turned out, it would not have been a failure after all. But we need to focus on the goal. When I joined one of the companies that I worked for, I knew from the beginning that I was stepping into some very big shoes. The reason why I say that is because I was coming into this company, the second company where I worked, and I was taking somebody's place. Now that somebody whom I was replacing, I had decided to get married and migrate to another country. And they had recommended me to be her replacement as the head of a major sales group within this multinational company. Now, this sales group was run as a very tight ship. They were very productive. They were one of the best groups in the company, and yet they were the smallest group. And so the president of the company took me in, and he said in just a few words, your job is to grow this group. That's your job. You need to grow the number of your sales managers. You need to grow the number of your salespeople. But you see, when I had come into that company, they had just won a major sales award. And that's what really turned them on. And so somehow that distracted them, and that distracted even myself perhaps from what the real goal should have been. And so to a great extent, we became fixated at some point of the year that we should, being the defending champion, should win that sales award again for the second year in a row. Did we win it? No, we did not. We failed. And I take responsibility because I, as the head of that group, was not really focused on our goal, because the president said, your goal is to grow this group. And so I repented of my sin. And we focused on the task at hand. And that is to grow the sales group, grow the number of sales managers, grow the number of salespeople. And that's what we began to do. And I'll get back to that story in just a moment. So we said the first thing is to focus on the goal, right? The next thing you and I need to focus on are our controllables. Now we said only God can cause all things to work together for good. But by His grace, He has given you and me the power of choice and the power of influence. And He has put certain things within our influence or under our control. Let me share with you a diagram that my wife often uses when she talks about this same issue. These are the circles of life. How many circles do you see? It's not a trick question, okay? It's really just 3 circles. It's not like maybe there's one behind the screen or something. No, it's 3, okay? So let me talk about the 2 smaller circles. The circle on the left, these are largely our controllables. The things that we can take responsibility for, such as our habits, our emotions, our values, our attitudes, the decisions we make, how we manage our time, the style by which we work, our management of our finances. These things, we act upon them. We can exercise our power of choice because they are our controllables. Are we clear about that? Okay. On the other hand, you have a circle on the right. And these things are our uncontrollables, such as you and I cannot choose who our parents are. We're already too late. Our boss, although yeah, you could resign, but as of now, when you get back Monday morning, most likely it'll be the same boss you had that you left the office a while ago. The weather, the hearts and minds of our children, our past, the policies of our company, our neighbor, unless he moves out or you do. These are givens. These are things that we need to accept for the moment as realities and conditions in our lives. Now, to some extent, the controllables and the uncontrollables do overlap, and we can exercise increasing influence over some things, but that's another story altogether. I just wanted to make a clear distinction between these two. Are we good so far? Now, there's a third circle, right? The big one that goes all around. That is God's circle. Why is it God's circle? Because we said earlier, God causes what? All things. The things that He may have put under our influence, and even the things that He has taken out of our influence, He can cause all of them to work for good. In the meantime, you and I need wisdom. You see at the bottom? You and I need wisdom. God's wisdom to tell the difference between our controllables and our uncontrollables. Can I ask you, what are the things that you fret most about and that stress you out the most? Is it your controllables or your uncontrollables? If you really think about it, we fret and we complain most about our uncontrollables. That's the problem. And that's why we need to focus on what? The other circle. Because that's what God has put within our responsibility. So we focus on the goal, and as we pursue that goal, we focus on the controllables. So we failed miserably in my first year in that company. We failed as the defending champions. But you see, I was focused on the wrong goal. And so I decided to refocus, and I decided to focus on our controllables. What did we do? We focused on casting the vision about how to grow that sales region. We focused on inviting people to join our team. We focused on holding career orientation seminars for people to learn how they could benefit from joining our company and our team. We trained our sales managers how to be better recruiters. We trained our salespeople how to be more productive so that they could be role models to the people that they invite, so that people will see how successful they are and they'll be enticed to explore the opportunities in our company. So we focused on the goal and we focused on our controllables. And by the grace of God, oh, by the way, there were things we could not control. And so we prayed, and we prayed like crazy. In a room such as this, when we would hold our regional sales meeting, at the end of the meeting, everybody would get on their knees on the floor. And we will pray. And we will tell the Lord, Lord, we really want to be the sales group of the year. If you will give it to us, we will be so happy. If you will not, we will still be so happy. Just help us to do our best. And so on that year, ladies and gentlemen, the second year, we bagged that sales award again. And by the grace of God, we did it the year after that. That had never been achieved in the history of that company, and I don't think it has ever been achieved thereafter. But you need to focus on the goal and focus on your controllable. But the most important focus is, I think you can guess, right? We focus on God. That is the most important focal point. He is the most important focal point. You and I need to focus on God, who He is, what He has done, and the fact that He is completely faithful and trustworthy. I'll give you 2 examples how that works. Moses. Many of you know his story. Let me just kind of take a piece of it and kind of squish it really tight. Moses was a prince of Egypt. Highly educated, very powerful, but he had a burden for the Hebrews who were slaves of Egypt. And so one day he saw an Egyptian oppressing a Hebrew. And so Moses, it says, looked this way and looked that way, and he accosted the Egyptian and he struck him and he killed him to save the Hebrew from oppression. And he hid the dead Egyptian under the sand. And perhaps in the back of his mind, he felt, that is how I take control. And that is how I achieve the goal that I have in my heart. The next day, the Bible tells us, he sees 2 Hebrews fighting. And he accosts the one who apparently is the oppressor or the offender. And he scolds him. And the fellow Hebrew tells Moses, who appointed you a prince over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday? And so Moses realizes the cat is out of the bag and he has to flee Egypt. And he ends up in the wilderness, tending sheep. And if you know anything about Egyptians, being shepherds is the lowliest, most unacceptable occupation in Egyptian society. And here he was, a prince of Egypt, now tending sheep. And perhaps in the back of his head he said, well, I'll do this maybe for a year or so, a few months, then it'll be safe to go back to Egypt. But that was not the case. How long did he tend sheep in the wilderness? Many of you know the answer. 40 years. If you were in Moses' sandals, will you be tempted to think that you have failed? Yes, I certainly would. But you see, God causes what? All things to work together for good, for those who love God and who are called according to His purpose. Moses had no inkling at the time, but God had an amazing plan for him. And so when the time was right, when Moses' character was molded to the point that God says, okay, Moses, it's time, then He put him to work to be the Redeemer of Israel and to accomplish something that was beyond his wildest dreams. Another story, another example. Peter, who told Jesus, I will march with you until death. I will not leave you. And you know what happened not very long after that, right? Peter denies Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Where does that leave him? Did he fail? We can say yes. He failed as to his commitment to Jesus, what he had spoken from his mouth. And yet God had a much more beautiful plan. And so Peter, in his brokenness, speaks to Jesus again after the resurrection, and Jesus lovingly reinstates him and sets him up to be at the head of a movement that Peter had no idea was going to be his role for the rest of his life. A movement that would impact the world even to this day. A movement of which you are a part, whether you realize it or not. And that's what brings you to this room tonight. How God used a broken man for the rest of his life after he thought that he had failed. Let's go back to our passage. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. According to His what? His purpose. Your purpose or God's purpose? By the way, whose purpose do you like better in your life? Yours or God's? Honestly, some people, they prefer their purpose because they don't trust God. But on the basis of God's Word and His revealed character, I can tell you, my friend, God's plan for you is far better than your plan for yourself. So, what is that purpose in verse 28? That last word in verse 28. What is that purpose? Verse 29 tells us, "For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to become conformed to the image of His Son, so that He would be the firstborn among many brethren." Folks, God's purpose and plan for you and me is to form our heart, to form our being, to transform us from the inside out, and the peg is Jesus. That can take time, and that takes divine intervention. Only God can do that. But the end product is something beyond our thinking or our imagining. Let me close this evening by sharing with you a children's story, which I heard 30 years ago. I have never forgotten up to this day. And it talks about glowing in the dark. It talks about keeping your focus, but ultimately keeping your focus on God and trusting Him. This story is called The Tale of Three Trees. If you've heard it before, you will hear it again. Obviously. Those are the three trees up on the mountain. And the story begins this way. Once upon a mountaintop, three trees dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. Just like you. You were grown up, but you may have dreams for yourself. And then it says, the first tree, "I want to hold treasure," the first tree said, "I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the whole world." Is that a wonderful dream? Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Wonderful dream. And then, of course, the second tree chimes in. He says, "I want to be a strong sailing ship," said the second tree. "I will be the strongest ship in the world." "I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all," said the third tree. "I just want to grow so tall that when people look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God." Wow, how profound. Ito yung seminarista in the group. No problem, wonderful dreams. What happened? One day, three woodcutters climbed to the mountain, and with a swoop of the first man's axe, the first tree fell. With a swish of the second man's axe, the second tree fell, and with a slash of the third man's axe, the third tree fell. The first tree, remember what he wanted to be? Okay. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop. Now, he wanted to be a treasure chest. But it says, but the carpenter was not thinking of treasure chests that day. Instead, he made the tree into a feed box for animals. Not very glamorous. Miles away from the first tree's dream. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter brought him to a shipyard, but no mighty ships were built that day. Instead, the second tree was made into a simple fishing boat, which you can imagine became smellier and smellier as the days went by. Now the third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and just left her in a lumberyard. What happened? The third tree asked. All I wanted to do was point to God. Well, many days and nights passed, and the three trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby into the feed box. And suddenly the first tree knew he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. Many years later, one evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. When the storm arose, the second tree shuddered in fear. But when the traveler stretched out his hand and said, "Peace," the storm stopped. And then the second tree knew he was serving the King of heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the woodpile and she was dragged through an angry crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy, the third tree knew God's love and timeless gift had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful, the second tree strong, and every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. Glow in the dark. Face failure with focus. Thousands of years ago, this prophecy was written. In Isaiah 9:2, it said, "The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them." And many years later, many generations after that, the Jews looked upon Jesus, the proclaimed Messiah, and they said, "Finally, this prophecy has come to fulfillment." And what was on their mind? What was on their mind was they needed a Savior to save them from Roman domination. And so they envisioned some kind of superhero who will fight their battle for them and vanquish the Romans and set them free to be a people. But what they wanted to see did not happen. And instead, their Messiah bled and died on a cross. And yet we know today that what appeared to have been a failure then was actually the greatest victory in the universe. The question, why did Jesus do what he did? He did it for you and for me. For what purpose? Jesus again spoke to them saying, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." If you really want to glow in the dark, you need to have the light of life within you. That's Jesus. The only one who can work all things for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. Shall we bow our heads together?